In all of those cases that you have handled, you have conducted autopsy ng EJK, what is the common na nakikita niyo po doon sa mga examination ninyo in relation to the issue of nanlaban? Doon po sa mga cases niyo, what does your examination say?
As I said earlier, it's a poor excuse to kill someone, especially if you are trained. We would expect the police to be. It's very, very unusual that the Philippine police would use nanlaban as a reason for killing. Okay? But if you would look at evidence, we'd have to go to individual cases to reconstruct. However, there are some instances where it's obvious. And earlier I said, some of them have defense type injuries. That's one. I have not gone over all of the cases to come up with an analysis. I'll do that soon. But another observation is that these people sustained multiple gunshot wounds. And the head, the chest were targeted. And those shots are meant to kill. So, and rarely, I doubt if there are actually cases brought to the hospital where these victims were shot and injured. They're shot to be killed. That's one observation I can make.
Enzo Recto, kalaban ang katiwalian at kasinungalingan, kakampi sa katotohanan at kabutihan.
The next to interpolate is Congressman Adyong.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I'll be very, very brief with my question because, and thank you, Dr. Raquel Fortun, for staying with us this late. And sorry for holding you. I know you're about to leave na kanina, but I'm just fascinated with the line of work you do. That's why I have several questions I'd like to ask you. Is it correct, ma'am, Dr. Raquel Fortun, that you're one of the few pathologists, forensic pathologists practicing in the Philippines?
There are only two.
There are only
formally trained. So that means you're a pathologist and then you underwent subspecialty training in forensic pathology. And the Philippine Society of Pathologists recognizes only two.
Only two.
In the Philippines.
Okay. And you also teach at the College of Medicine of the University of the Philippines in Manila, is it correct?
Yes, sir.
You're one
Yes,
of the
Mr.
faculty.
Chair.
Yes. Are you also the current chairperson of the department?
Not anymore. I
Okay.
served my 3 terms from 2016 to June of this year. I stepped down already.
But prior to, I'll go directly to the gist of my question po, Doctora. Prior to the war on drugs, you were already a trained forensic pathologist, right? Tama po yun?
Yes. Yes, sir. Yes, Mr. Chair.
And during the war on drugs, you were also involved in conducting autopsies on several of the victims. Is it correct?
Only those who were referred to me.
Okay.
I managed to see
yeah.
some.
Okay. That's why I'm also interested to know because, Mr. Chair, we only have 2 expert in the Philippines. I'm wondering why, Mr. Chair, our PNP has had I mean, those cases involving EJK, have they reached out to you in trying to solicit your services in order to at least ferret out, for example, in the investigation of cases involving EJK? Wala kong nag-avail ng yung professional services ang gobyerno during the war on drugs.
The cases I saw came from families,
Okay.
lawyers, NGOs, the government actually referring, that would be rare. Although recently the Department of Justice has been sending the Bucor cases to me.
Okay, doon po sa na-examine ninyo, those families who went to you and requested for your services. Ito po yung postmortem, di ba may postmortem po na autopsy ginagawa, right?
Yeah, all of them are postmortem.
Yes.
But just a few of them, I could still conduct an autopsy. So that means the body is more recently dead.
Okay.
You can still do an external and
Yeah.
internal exam. But then many of my cases recently are mostly skeletal remains. These
Okay.
are the exhumations.
Mr. Chair, I would like to ask po, Doktora, kasi the cases of EJK, the usual reasons that we hear from the operatives ay nanlaban, no? So the understanding really is that merong may official or formal operation na gagawin, tapos ang scenario is may baril, nanlaban kaya na baril. In all of those cases that you have handled, you have conducted autopsy ng EJK, what is the common na nakikita niyo po doon sa mga examination ninyo in relation to the issue of nanlaban? Kasi, yes, Mr. Chair, kasi gusto ko lang po malaman whether or not, kasi yung sabi niyo nga po na mostly ang investigation relies on evidence, witnesses' testimonies, sometimes subjective. So science cannot deny. And one of the things that probably for me, it's a lost opportunity sana for the government to really find out whether there's really a parang yung rampant killings in the streets, no? At nanlaban yung sinasabi. Yung po sa mga cases nyo, what does your examination say?
As I said earlier, it's a poor excuse to kill someone, especially if you are trained. We would expect the police to be. It's very, very unusual that the Philippine police would use nanlaban as a reason for killing. Okay? But if you would look at evidence, we'd have to go to individual cases. And as I said earlier, that is best analyzed with totality of evidence. And as my limitation is, many times I only have the body that is poorly preserved, and I have very limited information on the circumstances to reconstruct. However, there are some instances where it's obvious. And earlier I said some of them have defense type injuries. That's one. I have not gone over all of the cases to come up with an analysis. I'll do that soon. But another observation is that these people sustained multiple gunshot wounds. And the head, the chest were targeted. And those shots are meant to kill. So, and rarely, I doubt if there are actually cases brought to the hospital where these victims were shot and injured. They're shot to be killed. That's one observation I can make.
Ibig sabihin po, tama po kung, for example, i-assume ko na most of the autopsies or the cases you have handled in relation to EJK, po ma'am, yung summary yung namatay po, no, in relation to drug war, ay based on your examination, it does not reconcile with the usual na parati po natin naririnig na nanlaban based on your findings, your forensic findings.
Well, as I said again earlier, hindi naman porke nagbunot ng baril or naglabas ng baril ang isang tao, ay papatay na ang pulis. And I believe it was asked earlier, asan na itong mga baril na to? There really has to be an objective scientific investigation here. A lot is missing. Like for instance, police would say that the individual fired a gun. But where is the gun? The first thing you do when you secure it is you check if it's operational, meaning it can be fired. Okay, and the other is you might want to check for, again, it was mentioned earlier, gunshot residues on the person. And if the police are still relying on an ancient paraffin test, that's crazy. But really, there are ways to rebut or refute a claim such as nanlaban. There are ways. If you only do an objective, scientific, independent investigation. But unfortunately, in the Philippines, the killers investigate themselves.
Well, I agree with you on that, Doktora po. No? I'm asking you this po, Dr. Fortune, Mr. Chair, because I guess you were invited to a conference or press conference years ago. Tama po ba in where you said that based po dun sa mga findings you sa remains that you examined, mga death certificates, ang sinasabi ay ang cause of death ay natural causes, but based on your investigation, parang ang result actually ay hindi siya natural death, homicide, no? Tama po ba 'yon? And are these cases related to the EJK or are they the EJK cases?
I'm glad that issue has been brought up because that has been my frustration. There was one autopsy case I did where it was brought to my attention that this guy had a death certificate saying he died of acute myocardial infarction. But here is the body with multiple gunshot wounds. He even had a bullet embedded in the wrist. And therefore, definitely this is not a natural death. I was asked to review death certificates to look for other cases, but I said there is nothing I can refute these death certificates with until I was asked to examine the skeletal remains of those we exhumed. And so far, I have a collection of about 14 cases. 12 of them had an outright natural cause. Pneumonia, acute myocardial infarction, sepsis. But here are the bones saying they were shot multiple times. Right? One case I still am working on because the history is he was in jail for a drug-related case. And he was mauled in jail, brought to a hospital. And then the death certificate says skin infection. Okay, so that's still pending because I'm still asking for the hospital records. My most recent case is also an example of a miscertification. The doctor did not write a natural cause. However, I believe there is an understatement. Why? The doctor, who's a police medical legal officer, said gunshot wounds trunk. But I was given a picture of the decedent or the one who died taken after he was shot. And clearly in the face, the mouth is blown up. You have lacerations all over. And this is, just by looking at it, this is consistent with an intraoral shock. But it was not cited by the police doctor in the death certificate. So I would count this also as a miscertification.
Doktora, yung mga ganito po, when these cases are brought to your attention po, and there are mostly yung mga cause of death are natural death, etc. Saan po galing itong sino pong nag-i-issue nitong mga death certificates na ito?
In my collection of
Yes.
cases, curiously, 5 of them were signed by one doctor from the City Health Office of Caloocan. 4 of them were from one doctor who writes her name after her name, private physician, somewhere in Commonwealth. So this is Quezon City. And then the others are a sprinkling of some doctors here and there.
So this is the time when the drug war was at its peak, no?
This would be from 2016 onwards.
It's I don't know if it's a coincidence, Mr. Chair, because the way Dr. Fortune relayed this to us, Mr. Chair, I remember before the formation of the Quadcom, we had a committee hearing ng Committee on Human Rights, and we were also asking about the cause of death, yung karamihan po sa mga namatay. And it's funny because you've mentioned about Caloocan. In this particular case that I distinctly remember, ang sabi is, nung namatay, binarel. Tapos ang bumarel, hindi naman mga uniformed men. Ang bumarel, kung di ako nagkakamali, I think Miss Conti can correct me, no, kung hindi maganda yung pag remember ko doon sa narration nung isang pamilya nung namatay. Ang bumarel apparently is a vigilante type of killing, yung cause of bumarel. So hindi nakilala, so dinala doon sa morgue, kukunin nila. Apparently they need to pay 5,000 pesos. I don't know, kasi hindi naman namin kultura yon, but maybe because of the services that the morgue had gone through over the body, so the family needed to pay 5,000 pesos. Pero nung kinuha po nila yung katawan, ang cause of death is pneumonia. Pero alam nilang binaril. This was in Caloocan also. And it's funny because Dr. Raquel Fortun mentioned about that same place, no? That's why I'm asking you, Doktora, based on your, kasi ang nakikita po namin dito, there's really a widespread cover-up, no, nang nangyari during the EJK. Kasi yung mga, at the height of the war on drugs, may mga cases na sinasabi apart from nanlaban, the cause of death ay iba, no, pneumonia. And here you are, Doktora, sharing us your expert opinion. And in fact, you have already undergone a autopsy, an actual autopsy on these cases. Would you, on your expert opinion, based on what you have handled so far, and with all the death, the wrong cause of death as reflected in the death certificates, would you agree, Doktora, that there was a cover-up, for example, that was done during the EJK to a point that some of the agencies in our government were complicit in trying to cover the widespread killings, the violations that were committed during the time when the former president declared a war against drugs, illegal.
Yes, I would agree. I would agree. A lot of people were complicit in the killings. People in government, unfortunately, people in my profession, also non-technical people, I suspect the funeral. What we have actually, what's very deficient in the Philippines is we don't have a death certificate. That is lacking. And I believe when President Duterte became president, he simply took advantage of the deficiencies in our system. As I said earlier, I was seeing all these EJKs before. The police were killing, ambushing, carnappers, kidnappers, and then there came the war on drugs. And they simply did the same thing, but on a wider scale.
Doktora, what happens po pag halimbawa yung mga cases na wherein based on your autopsy examination na it turned out na hindi pala yung talagang cause of death? What happens to those cases? Were there any corrections made by the agency, for example, or the physician who initially issued that certificate? What was the nangyayari po doon in the case of yung mga mali yung kanilang sinusulat sa death certificate na cause ng death?
Right now, I am involved in 2 court cases. This is with law group Ideals. They are trying to assist the relatives to correct the death certificate. But these are just 2 cases. When we publicly came out with these findings, the miscertified causes of death, This was, first time was, I believe, April of 2022 when this first publicly came out. PNP said they will investigate. At some point, I told Secretary Remulla about this, and he said, NBI will investigate. But so far, I doubt anything has happened.
Let me thank you, Dr.
You have 1 minute,
yes,
Congressman
one
Adjong.
last question. One last question. Attorney Conti, involved ka ba doon sa mga cases na sinabi ni Doktora, doon sa mga miscertified cause of death na pinipresent sa kanya? And if you have cases you filed before the court, what are the status of these cases?
The NUPL is not involved in the correction of the death certificates, as mentioned by
But,
Dr. Fortun.
yes.
It's Ideals. It's a group that works on these cases. But we do have victims under Rise Up for Life and for Rights where this has happened.
Okay.
And the correction would have to be proven in court under a Rule 108 correction. It's a special proceeding para po mabago yung death certificate kasi hindi na pwedeng gumawa ulit ng bagong death certificate. And it takes time and money. Kaya problematic po to sa ibang pamilya. Kaya yung iba, kahit mali yung death certificate dahil nailibing na, okay na rin. Kumbaga, moving forward, wala na, tapos na to. But, it's helpful for the families that the correct cause of death is indicated if they intend to file. And this is what we handle, cases of murder, homicide, or crimes against humanity. Gusto po nilang magkaso dun sa pagpatay.
Thank you, Attorney. Now, Mr. Chair, for my last manifestation, Mr. Chair, yung pong the convenient excuse that we always hear from, with all due respect to our uniform, I have high respect for our uniform men, but for some time, because there was a state policy, to go against anybody who is either accused of selling drugs or even those who are been addicted to the illegal substance, unfortunately, karamihan din namamatay. And those cases na wrong, be at the wrong time, at the wrong place, tulad po nung kanina, yung si Britannico, yung sinasabi pong nanlaban ng mga yung mga argument nila, rason nila, it doesn't reconcile with the fact na merong mga misdeclaration or even miscertification ng cause of death. Kasi kung yun po talaga yung nangyayari, Mr. Chair, para sa akin, why do they need to make up stories? And I guess, unfortunately, in our country, we only have two experts to tell us really the story. Kasabi nga nila, even yung patay, may storya at pwede magsalita. And this only it would only be made possible through forensic science. And unfortunately, we do not have enough experts for us to be able to really, strengthen our justice system, because this is all part of the justice system, no? Yung pagbibigay ng hustisya doon sa mga namamatay na mga some are really killed, no? While kanina po we were listening, Doktora, when we were asking about the smuggling of illegal drugs, it's just so ironic that while we see countless victims, those people lying in the streets, lifeless, cuddled by their loved ones, by their mothers, brothers, girlfriends, sons and daughters, there were cases of importation, smuggling of illegal drugs. It's so funny and it's so ironic. It's mind-boggling. Tapos here we are, there's several cases of death in the streets. Tapos misdeclared pa and miscertified pa ang cause of death na pneumonia. So God bless you, Doktora, for doing this. And I hope, Mr. Chair, part of the intention of this Quadcom is to really craft a bill and probably to look at the loopholes on how we can probably strengthen not only the policing, not only upholding the rule of law, but as well as to help out, probably invest more on forensic science, so that we can upgrade at least the investigative aspect of our policing, and as well as to find out what really happened in cases where there are criminal or activities involved. So marami pong salamat, Dr. Fortun, for your time. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Attorney Conti.
So thank you, Congressman Adyong.
Bunyog Halikan na kasama ka, Bunyog. Kapag buklod ay may pag-asa, Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao, isa ang pananaw. Sa bagong Pilipinas ang bunyog isisigaw. Bunyog, bunyog.